All right, so set.
Wonderful. So I'd like to call to order the July Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District Board meeting. As first order of business, we need to approve the agenda. Before we do that, there is a new resolution that I would like to add. It's resolution 2402, resolution relating to the Woodbury Target Store stormwater retrofit project change in contractor. I propose moving it to item 7B in action items. So what I would like to do is hear a motion to approve the agenda with the suggested changes.
I would motion to approve the agenda and move resolution 2402 to the action items.
I can second that.
Okay.
I'm gonna vote on it.
Yep. All in favor say aye.
Aye. Can I raise a, do we have a quorum?
We have a
Somebody
quorum,
do it.
3 out of 5.
Yeah, 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are gonna do a lot of motioning and a lot of seconding.
All right.
Ready to speak?
I was just
Yeah,
Thank
doing
you.
multitasking.
yeah, yeah.
Looking for somebody online.
No worries. Good question. I'd like to move forward with the third line item, the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Remember, we can have a discussion after the motion. Good question.
I will motion to approve the consent agenda.
I would second that.
Further discussion. I do have a question on the report out for the budget. I was curious if you guys could help educate me on the training and education aspects of district training and education. I noticed that particular budget isn't keeping up with that half year. We haven't spent half the budget.
Yeah, it's because most of our training and education happens in the fall.
Okay.
So a lot of our conferences and stuff
Okay.
happen in the fall.
Thank you for that.
Yep.
Last thing on the budget, I was looking at the health and safety program.
Yeah,
I'm super happy that we're doing those programs. It does look like it went a little high. Is there a driver for that?
yeah, we're working through some changes to our manual, our safety manual this year that we decided to move forward with, even though we hadn't planned on it. So there was some changes, some additional funds spent to work with FAR and our staff to update our manual.
And then I'll pause if there's any other. I have one other question, or this is not a change to the consent agenda or the way we voted, but as we look forward at the Target Woodbury stormwater retrofit, I would ask for the next progress payment number 3 to have an updated contract price. That would be it. It's nothing to do with this particular one, but a future update, maybe in August or September, whenever they come back, to have just an updated contract price. Okay, those are my discussion points. Anything else?
I have a couple of questions. I believe the application 2440, which is Baleen aquatic plant harvesting. I'm just curious, do we know where the harvested plant material is going to end up going? How is it going to be managed to assure that it's not going to result in movement to other water bodies, composted, disposed of other ways?
DNR manages those regulations of how they're disposing of it, and they do have a DNR public office permit for this. I can double check specifically on what that looks like, but my guess is it's hauled offsite. There's no guess. I know it's hauled offsite.
Yeah.
Where it goes offsite, I'm not sure.
Okay, just curious if anyone did that. The Woodbury retaining wall permit, I believe, was in the consent.
No, that's coming up yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I have good questions.
Yep. All right. That's all. Thank you.
I missed one of my comments, so forgive me. There was on 2434, the Rice Street crossing. Can you help us understand and help us think up through what's meant by a moderate vulnerability drinking water supply management area? How does that pertain to this particular permit?
Yeah, so hopefully you can hear me. I was having audio issues. We
Yeah, I
okay?
can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so this one of the things that we check during permit application review, there are certain areas in our district, mostly in this area near the St. Paul Regional Water Drinking Water Treatment Facility, that are designated as drinking water supply management areas where you want to be careful about stormwater infiltration so as not to contaminate the drinking water supply. You can infiltrate in Duisma's. This is through the MPCA has all the rules and restrictions. But it has to be in certain areas and occasionally you'd have to do a contamination screening checklist. So it's cited here as just another reason for them to do filtration in this case. In addition to the high groundwater. But that's just something that we check, because the MPCA has restrictions in certain cases and prohibitions in other cases for stormwater infiltration near drinking water.
And just to make sure that I summarized correctly, Nicole, it's a justification for why filtration needs to be or was proposed, just to hit that. Okay, thank you.
Right. Yep. Because we require applicants to look at infiltration first. But if they can cite things like poor soils, high groundwater, contamination concerns, those are all valid reasons to switch to filtration.
Can I follow up on that? I believe, didn't it say in the application that there are sandy soils, at least on part of that location? And I was curious why that hadn't been considered for infiltration. Given the.
Because of the high groundwater and contamination concerns.
All
So
right.
it's, in this case, it's not a soil type limitation, but there are
I
other
remember.
restrictions. Yep.
Yep, all right, thank you.
I know that area quite well, and this is a commentary that has no bearing on the way I would vote, but there are now 3 high volume housing areas in that. And I don't recall each of them, but that's a lot for the roadway. Hopefully the cities are coordinated. Okay. Any further questions on the consent agenda or discussion topics for the consent agenda? Wonderful. All in favor of passing the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Moving forward to visitor comments. So anyone who is online for the 2434 permits and the 2440 stewardship grants, we have approved those.
I think everybody else online is here for
The Woodland.
other items. on the
Other
agenda,
items.
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any visitor want to offer comments? There's none in the room. Well, let's continue to the permit programs. Nicole, I pass the mic to you.
The first permit that was not on the consent agenda is 24-35, the Woodlane Drive retaining wall removal project. This is a City of Woodbury project to remove a failing retaining wall and then restore it with a more gradual sloped embankment to improve safety and stability in the area. They did request a variance for our compensatory storage requirement because they were able to demonstrate that the adjacent homes have adequate freeboard, even with a slight increase in the 100-year high water level. And then additionally, we're able to demonstrate through modeling that there's no peak flood elevation impacts downstream.
I have, so I appreciated the report. It looks like Bar helped with that report. Did I read that correctly? For the
They provided the existing conditions or our modeling information for this area. We're also familiar with it because we've coordinated on some maintenance in this on these stormwater basins as well. But yeah, they used our XP Swim model to inform their modeling and calculations.
looking at the graphics, is it safe to assume that the blue and red mainly overlap in figure 2 and 3? Or completely overlap, I should say.
What figure are you looking at?
Figure 2 and 3, Nicole? When I look at it, I just didn't see a blue.
In the
I'm just-
SCH memo,
Yeah, in the SCH memo,
yeah, I believe that's showing that it was,
there's
there's the
no
same.
impact. Yeah, I just wanted to make
Oh,
sure. the
yeah.
conclusion is correct.
Yeah.
And my last question is, so I acknowledge the downstream structures or the risk to the downstream impact was negligible. Curious about comments that were made that say that some of or at least implied to me that some of the water could be held on the streets. Did I internalize that incorrectly? And does that area, like have flooded streets periodically?
I think that was in the detailed modeling discussion for
Yeah.
existing conditions. If I'm remembering correctly, it's been a while since I looked at this, but what's your question about that? I think that's just how it behaves in existing conditions.
Okay, so that's what I wasn't clear on, Nicole. I wasn't sure if it behaved that on existing conditions or would be the new state of things. And that's where I was trying to get some clarity.
Yeah. Yeah, they're demonstrating no adverse flood impacts both for peak discharge and the rise in high water level. So it's not like a new adverse flood condition as a result of this fill.
Okay. So I was trying to connect. Thank you. Any other? All right, open it up.
Yeah, I have a question. It seems we've been having a number of permits that are coming to us with variances of different rules. And this is partly maybe for clarification, education on my part, but do we have the ability to ask for a compensatory payment? Is that?
For what?
So
For
if they're
flood?
not able to essentially replace flood prone areas. And you know, that rule, I believe it's rule D.
Yeah.
Is there a way that they could, you know,
No,
pay a whatever,
Right.
1% project?
No, well, I mean, I don't think we'd wanna go that route, so we're pretty strict on our compensatory storage. They must meet it, or
Yep,
they must show that it's not impacting that.
yeah, I
the
mean,
flood
in
levels,
this
right?
case, yeah,
So I don't know that we've ever approved anything, allowed any variance from that rule that can't show that there's no change. And so, and that's, I mean, because your flood risk is
negligible in this case.
in this case, right? But
Right.
we wouldn't, even if they were to pay us, you know, like a stormwater impact fee like we do for water quality, you know, we would never be able to, it would be very difficult to be able to find that. That would put the burden on us, right?
To define a. kind
Well,
of
and
a-
to find flood risk
Right.
reduction opportunities.
The way I internalize that
specifically,
rule
but-
is effectively if they didn't meet it, it threatens habitable structures. Is
Right.
the way I've
Right.
mentally
Okay.
internalized it.
Right.
And so they need to do something about it. It's kind of how it's been embodied to me.
Yeah,
It's like we don't really wanna have more opportunities or flexibility for.
Yeah.
So
In
we
that rule.
so we don't have the ability, kind of as we do with water quality and
I mean,
flood impact.
It's not that we don't have the ability, it's that we
haven't
probably don't wanna
pursued.
go down
I
that
think
road.
the return on investment would be really low because what was, I think, stated is we threaten those other structures and then we're effectively held liable because we're holding on.
And change the situation. flood
And-
risk.
And I would certainly agree, particularly with this rule. But in some of the other variances, for some, you know, a buffer,
Mhm.
for instance, doesn't have as much potential liability
Right.
associated with
Yeah.
it. Would we, do we have the ability is probably one question. And have we ever gone that path? Where would ask for some compensatory payment?
I think it's an
And
interesting,
this is more for my education than it is
I mean, I
necessarily
think
them
our stormwater,
excluding.
that's what our stormwater impact fund is,
Right.
right? Like, they can't meet our rule, so in lieu of that, then they pay us and we find projects and we do the water quality project work. And it'd be a little bit harder, I think, in some of the other rules. I think for water quality, we're already doing a lot of those projects, so we can apply it. We don't do buffer, you know, a lot of,
Sure.
as much
And-
buffer work or as much, I guess.
And I think in the water quality, it's probably easier to come up with a calculatable
Right,
impact.
yeah.
Whereas in some of these other rules, the ability to translate that into
Yeah,
a,
yeah.
well, how much, you know, in terms of a monetary credit.
Yeah.
I understand that, that would certainly be a challenge, so, thank you.
but your comment is actually timely, mainly because we're going to talk through or maybe review the watershed management plan scope summary.
Mhm.
And so as we think about changes to how we hold things, how we hold accountability, it's a discussion that we should probably have.
It came to me because it seems we're seeing a number of
Yeah.
variances. You know, this month, and I believe there's one or two last
Yeah.
month, and.
I think that's pretty typical, right? Anytime you have a regulatory program, you
Yeah,
have to
sure,
have
you're gonna
the
have variance.
opportunity to be heard on variances from those programs. Like, I wouldn't say that you're seeing more than usual. I think it's, you know, kind of a typical number, but I think you're right. There is some opportunity to just talk through our regulatory program and how we manage this.
And generally, just having permits in a populated location or an urban area,
Yeah.
we're going to run against old rules, as you know.
Yes, yep.
But yeah, let's talk about it as part of our planning. Looking forward to 27.
Thank you.
I will say too that I track the number of variances annually and compare, you know, previous years, and see how that trend is going. It might inform a rule change, or we might need to look at why is this being requested so much, but historically, it's usually Rule E, it's wetland buffers. Temporary disturbance, any disturbance in a wetland buffer triggers a variance automatically, even if it's temporary. And then we see those variance requests like in the next permit application where, like Val mentioned, we're pretty built out, so there's a lot of wetlands that don't in existing conditions meet our wetland buffer rules, so it's difficult for sites that are redeveloping to meet those, but yeah, I would say the vast majority has to do with wetland buffers for variances.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that, Nicole. I'm really glad to hear that you are tracking that. Is it being tracked to respective rule?
Yeah,
Not just- Yeah, okay. Excellent, thank
Yeah, and I
you.
think you usually include that in your summary at the end of the year, I think, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
From like, what,
I was gonna say, my thought was similar to Mark, but not creating a fund. I'm looking at this and are these publicly held properties where this water is flowing? Do we know, to the south of the site?
The first pond flows to the second pond and, they chased it downstream, but I'm not aware where it transitions to private property.
to build on Ben's question, I think that was a big, you have enough.
I was just curious, cause it's not labeled. I was going to say, if this is public property, I mean, they're bringing in fill for this wall. I just would like a little more background, because you could easily be creating storage using fill from the site for this slope. So in conjunction with what Mark is saying, it's great that they modeled this, and it shows no change. But how much can it really cost if this is also a publicly held property to do that work when you have the equipment on site? I just don't see it as fiscally infeasible if that's the case.
I think as staff, we also weigh the disturbance to the existing, you know, pond and shoreline. put it this way, if they could not demonstrate adequate freeboard, if they could not demonstrate no change in peak water surface elevations, I would not be presenting this variance to you, or I would not be recommending approval. So it is consistent with how we've treated these in the past. It's consistent, similar to that of the, areas down by the Mississippi River. I think it's always kind of a weighing the benefit with the added disturbance that it would take to create that amount of compensatory storage. So but yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's just part of the consideration as well.
Yeah, just cumulative changes to the floodplain over time may shift the onus to the next person, so. that is-
Yeah, I mean, it's negligible.
At this
We had-
project,
We add those to, a bunch more.
Yeah, death by a thousand cuts, which you get.
yeah,
Yeah, in this particular instance, I think, so in this new information will feed our models, is that right? The bar that we leverage for that area?
Yeah, I mean, our models don't typically get to that detail,
It
right? We
depends on
wouldn't
the
be putting
magnitude.
in a small change like that. And it's not changing anything, so it wouldn't change the model, right? It would be the same model. Cause it's not changing.
And so that's where I was trying to tease out, okay. And I did find where I was confused about the roadway. It's in the opening section where it talks around page 2 of the memorandum. I was trying to go through something similar with is it public land or private land, but it sounds like the water today goes through people's yards. The water tomorrow will flow through the road. That's how that second paragraph reads. I assume that's correct.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Page 2 is talking about the existing conditions model.
Yeah, Nicole, I'll draw your attention to the last 4 sentences of the second paragraph. There's a safety concern with it flowing through the yard. That's what I was trying to tease out in my head. It didn't really tell me about the type of flow, and you guys can correct me too. When I read that, I was like, I'm happy it's not on people's properties. It's great. But it looks like, or reads as, it's gonna flow through the road.
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
that still flows to the discharge point eventually.
yeah,
Okay, so that you
it
would
wouldn't,
be,
it's not really changing that.
okay. That's what I was trying to understand.
Sorry, I'm looking at.
It starts with note that the berm on the west side of Wood Lane Drive at this location has been raised.
Yeah.
Such that any ponded water in the low point will flow south and then west on the road rather than moving through the yards of the home to the west.
Okay.
I think, do you have?
No, I just wanted to understand that particular, as long as it doesn't propose or oppose any storage on the road, I'm fine. That's more what I was trying to tease out.
From my reading, that was a separate project, because what they're doing is on the east side of the road, and that is across the way.
Oh, I read them the same project, but a different part. The area
Yeah.
of concern was the 2 points modeled, is what I gathered. Or 4 points, 3 point model.
Confused with point, but I mean, the roadways are used for water conveyance all the time. That's not, this would not be a concern even if they were directing.
I was trying to think through, and I don't drive this area a lot.
Yeah.
Does it, like, we've had a lot of water, does it hold water currently?
Oh,
Now
I don't,
it's,
yeah, I don't think it's a matter of holding water, it's just using as conveyance. It's still, there's storm sewers and. Yeah.
that's good, and that's where I was looking for the clarity, so
Mhm.
that's.
And I guess my interpretation, this is maybe speculative, but that volume that potentially would be carried on the road rather than yards was not a significant change either from what it had historically been. So
That's fair, that's
Yeah.
fair.
Right. Yep.
Thank you for the robust discussion. So let me just ask this, do I have a motion to approve permit application 2435?
I will move to approve permit 2435.
Second.
Perfect. I like that this has a safety bend to it. I appreciate it. I just wanted to vet it out, but there's another secondary thing. So thank you all for your patience. All in favor, say aye.
I,
Moving to 2436. After you, Nicole.
You might recognize this project. You've already seen this a couple times. This is just the permit request for the Cottage Place project. So it's triggering Rule E for wetland buffer disturbance, obviously. We're gonna be messing around in there and creating new wetland, and then restoring the wetland buffer. And then it's also over an acre, so it's triggering erosion and sediment control for our own rules. There's no stormwater management, water quality piece because there's no hard surfaces being created as part of this project. But as I mentioned, that variance request for wetland disturbance is included to accommodate, the very goal of this project, which is to restore wetlands. So if there's any questions?
It's similar to that old adage, you have to spend money to make money. Is that what you're trying to say?
That
The purpose is to work within the
Yeah.
wetlands.
Yep.
They
Yeah.
have to disturb it to get all the garbage out of it.
You wanna
so.
make an omelet?
I'll pause it open for questions.
I have a few questions on this, and it's probably, I don't want to get too far into the weeds. But I did notice in looking at the planting list, there are at least a couple of species that are proposed to be planted that I would say are currently out of their current range. And I don't know if there was some intent that there might be a facilitated migration, thinking climate change or other. I'm specifically asking on the south side, eastern hemlock. Great conifer trees, but they really are rarely, if ever, very on the east side of the state found. They're more of an eastern species. So I was curious there. And again, I don't, buttonbush occurs in the state, but in the southeast part of the state. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I've seen a number of instances where landscape plans have species that there may be some real intent
Yeah,
to try to facilitate, migration, or the hemlocks that provide a great buffer to the residents to the south, and there aren't a lot of other possible coniferous trees suitable. So I was just searching for a little bit more
Sure.
explanation, especially since it's
Yeah.
our project essentially.
Yeah, is it okay if we get back to you
Sure.
personally on that?
yeah.
I don't think we have.
I personally can't answer to that, and I see Marcy Bean from Bars Online, but she didn't do that planting plan, so I won't put her on the spot. Brendan Doherty worked on that. I do suspect that, I know that that our landscape architects do talk a lot about planning for migration of species, but I think especially if you have specific species in mind, that's I'd be happy to chase that down and get back to you on that, yeah. So if there's I wrote down buttonbush and eastern hemlock.
Yeah, those are the two that, there are probably others, but
Sure,
it's a long list. They kind of caught me
okay,
on.
yeah, be happy to look that up.
Yeah, I think when we were doing the kind of field trip about a year or so ago at this site, there was some conversation about what this wetland was and what we might envision it to be. And I think in short, it was probably some kind of a seasonally flooded.
Yeah.
Seems like probably more of a forested type wetland based on the trees that have been there historically. I'm not sure if that was the case but I'm.
Yeah.
I'm
I-
looking
yeah, I
for.
listed- I listed that in the cover sheet because I figured you'd have that question mark. Yeah, it's existing seasonally flooded, forested, and then the anticipated wetland type wet meadow for the restored areas.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a table just comparing past and designed. But maybe I'm taking it too far.
What do you mean, a table
Well, I
showing
just,
those numbers on it,
yeah.
or, okay.
So what it has been as far as number of acres are forested and that, you know, degraded forest type wetland. And what it's envisioned to be from, you know, wet meadow, probably some shrubs, probably, and forested components. It would just help, at least me, understand better what our kind of design endpoints are. I don't really have a good handle on, you know, what we
Sure.
hope this thing to look like and how it to.
Sure, and you know what we can do is, you know, this is a project that was first initiated quite some time ago, before any of you were on the board, actually. And we do have some presentation materials that show some historic photos of the site and some more information. So, I'd be happy to get that to you as well, for some information.
And I think it's a great exercise to ensure that we restore it back to normal. Do you think it would change the way you would vote on the permit approval?
No, I don't think that it would change.
But it would be good information to ensure that we're historically matching what's there.
Well, we're not trying to match
Forgive me.
necessarily, right? We're trying to.
Restore,
We're-
forgive me.
We're trying to improve what has been there.
Yeah, that's a better way of wording it.
Yeah.
And I guess I don't have the information in front of me, but when we approved, so this is the permit, right, for our, under the permit, but when
Yep.
we approved the plans, that information wasn't in the, I would think that would have been in the report and the plans when we,
I don't remember
went out for
seeing it,
bid,
because I've kind of
but
raised some of these same questions
oh,
Uh,
maybe, yeah,
a couple of times. I might have
but
missed
we
it.
can make sure we get you that information. I know we have it, it's just,
Yeah.
if it's not in the format, you
I mean,
need to see
I'm
it.
sure that this is, you know, it's being presented to the municipalities, the, you know, cooperating property owners, the church there, and just in our conversation, it would be nice to have a clear understanding of what this is intended to be. And maybe it's there and I've just missed it.
We'll pull it together. for
Yep,
you
we'll
so
pull
you
it
can have
together.
That information.
For sure. That definitely exists.
My last question, and I'm not sure if it's best to bring it at this point or later on in the packet when we do the, I forget what we call it, but kind of the rundown of active projects and, you know, what things
The
have.
PSR, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there is mentioned there about some federal rule actions and I think is it long-eared bats and some tree concerns. It can say more about that
The
from a
delays.
scheduling standpoint, you know, as we're approving the permit.
Sure. Well, as far as the long-eared bat situation goes, it's not that there have been bats found in that environment, but the
It's
environment
in
is
the
such, it's
range.
conducive to it.
Yep.
And so as such, we can't be removing trees over or until November.
So there's a schedule thing.
There's a schedule thing.
Yep.
So yeah, between, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's like November to, I can't remember if it's March or whatever.
Yeah.
It's October to April.
It's October to April.
In
Yeah.
general.
Okay, so so during that time, we can't remove any trees, so that's dictating the schedule and actually kind of compressing the construction schedule, because then we're also dealing with frozen conditions and excavation, so it's gonna be a little tricky to thread that needle. We're hoping for good weather. Yeah, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Just- I want a little bit more explanation.
Sure.
I think the previous conversation, I know I thought whether I asked the question, but whether or not there was an intent to do winter construction just
Yeah.
because of you're working in wetlands and you
Yeah.
can sometimes get mired and, you know, whatever. It's
Yep.
better to do winter construction, but this feeds right into that. So
Yeah.
again, trying to get a clear picture.
Yeah, for sure. The hope is that they'll be able to get in and remove the trees right at the beginning of that window or before that window closes, using
Yeah.
mixed metaphors. And then be able to do excavation during the winter, but we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Thank
So, that's the hope.
Questions from you, Bennett?
Didn't have you on this one.
Actually, there's one more.
Oh,
So,
yeah, go ahead. Brent.
looking at the plans, I might have missed it, but I did not see a clear requirement, essentially a construction note that would require contractors to assure that their equipment is clean before it enters. And,
Oh.
you know, I mean, there's a lot of invasives there now. We're probably gonna be dealing with invasives. We don't wanna bring anything additional on, you know, on the equipment, tracks and backhoes and so forth.
I will
Yeah,
check
that's
it.
not, I
I'm
can
sure it's
check.
on the
That's not
SWIP.
one of our
It
standard
was on the
notes.
SWIP. The SWIP wasn't provided in this,
Right, but,
but I'm sure that's on the SWIP, otherwise.
and, yeah, but it would seem to be appropriate to have a construction note on the plan. So that's gonna be shared with the contractor. SWIP would be too.
I can check into that. It would, yeah, I mean, you don't have the drawings,
Yeah.
in the packet, but I can check to see what's in there about that.
Thank you. That's
bet.
it.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Follow up through emails, good for those. Let's do that.
Yep.
Do I have a motion to approve application 2436?
I will motion to approve the application.
Do I have a second?
I will second 2436.
Awesome. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Enforcement reports.
Yeah, so I listed this month's violations, meetings, activities, some of the bigger project updates, just some photos of some good vegetation establishment that we're seeing as a benefit to all this rain that we've been getting. So we're able to, close permits, which is nice. And yeah, we have Kendra and both Mary and Kendra joining us tonight. I know the board was, liking those intern updates, so we wanted to have Kendra write an intro in the enforcement report as well.
Welcome, Kendra.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And I know you haven't said anything about the last part, but new titles.
Yeah, well, that was part of
Yeah, that was in last month's packet, but yeah.
I just like the announcements and the special pictures.
That was a Mary edition. It's very nice.
I don't have any questions on the enforcement reports. I'm happy to see you're closing them. And
Yeah,
I'm
we are
happy
too.
that there's benefits to the rain.
Yeah, I have
Definitely.
a question. I travel frequently on actually McKnight Road along the Heights. And I've noticed a couple of times where it looks like they're dewatering the large storm pond. It looks like they're dewatering into the storm sewer. And is that something that we've looked at, that we're comfortable with it, that we've seen in the field? And then I guess in relation to that, have any field staff looked at the wetland across the road to the southeast? This is several years ago. I know that there's a culvert in that area. And I'm wondering if there's been any sediment transport to that culvert or not. So.
Yeah, I can answer those questions. So the dewatering happening at the Heights, they're pumping down the wetland mitigation areas they're working on. So they have to pump them down so they can finish grading those wetland mitigation areas. all the pumping operations are discharging clean water, and they have to call me or text me when they're going to start pumping, and then they send me photos of the discharge, and then they have to continue monitoring the discharge. So if it ever turns turbid, they have to turn off their pumping operations. So we've been very up to date on that dewatering process at the project. And then as far as any offsite wetlands, I've been monitoring those during routine inspections for runoff. And so the new wetland areas that they're creating are having new structures that tie into offsite wetlands. So those are plugged right now, so they can't leave the site until they're stabilized. And then I check the offsite wetlands either way, just for any impacts that could happen from street tracking, just to make sure that's not making its way into the McKnight catch basins and then into those wetlands.
Okay, good to hear. Thank you, Mary.
Other questions on the enforcement report?
No, that's a good thing that you drive by those places on leave. You can mentally take some notes on. Thank you, Mark. No other questions. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Okay, transitioning to stewardship grants. There you go, Paige.
Yeah, so we have a unique request here. This is for the Woodland Hills Church project, and I'll point out that we have Jody and Janice from the church here, and then Stefan from Shoreline Landscaping is the contractor on the project. So they'll be able to answer some questions, but I will kind of start out, give you a little history, and then Marcy, I think, is going to give a little more detail just to help explain what's going on here. This is something none of us have seen before. You know, at the district, at Bar, and I think the contractor too, pretty unique. But so this one, you'll remember, it came back or came to the board earlier this year, and you approved funding for this pretty unique project in itself. The church has partnered with an organization called Settled to have a demonstration site for tiny homes that would be placed out here. So they were looking to remove over an acre of impervious surface from their north side of their parking lot. And the city was on board with losing that number of parking spaces. The church doesn't need them. They have, you know, significant parking around the building. So they were pretty excited about this opportunity. So we worked with them to come up with that design and incorporate a rain garden for the stormwater treatment as part of that, and then native plantings in there. We did not do additional soil borings with this. We had soil borings from the 2014 rain garden project that we did on site, as well as, you know, there's other permits in the area. So, you know, we had worked on Aldrich Arena, some other street projects. So we had soil borings from the area, you know, looking at historical photos and just based on what the church knew, you know, from when they moved in, they didn't have any anything of alarm that jumped out at us. So yeah, so nothing of alarm for the contractor when he got started. But then shortly after they started excavating, you can see in that memo the picture of layers, multiple layers of pavement was put in over time. Yeah, so Stephanie, I can't remember how many you dug at that point, but found a couple of spots where it was pretty significant. And that's where, you know, the church, and between the church and the contractor, and then talking with us, they put things on hold until we could do a little bit more investigating. And yeah, Marcy, I don't know if you want to jump into the pictures or if you want me to share those.
Can I ask you a quick question on the soil borings? The diagram, what looks like the first in the memo, the red marks, those were the only locations for the original soil borings. Did I internalize that correctly?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
So we did have one in the parking lot. We just didn't have the right location, I guess.
Well, it was, yeah, I mean, these borings were taken in 2014, which is sort of neither here nor there because they really changed on site since then.
Right.
And they were taken because, as I recall, we were looking for rain garden locations for the church. And it happened that one of the soil borings was in the center of the project area for this phase of the project.
Yeah.
It just certainly did not show what is in existence elsewhere on the site. It was, the soil boring was right on the edge of where things started to get really serious with the bituminous layers.
That's what I was curious.
Yeah, and I see Marcy, so Marcy being, I don't know that you have met her before, she's one of our landscape architects at Bar, and she's been managing this project, so I'll stop talking and I'll hand it over to Marcy. Marcy, what other background do you wanna share, or did you have enough?
Yeah, well, let me see if I can share my screen. Can you, let's see, which
Yeah.
screen am I showing?
We see it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so, this is the site plan. Well, so I'm gonna start here. So this is the existing parking lot, that we had
Marcy,
surveyed.
could you pause really quick, Marcy?
Sure.
Somebody minimize the participants so we can see it better. It's just really hard to see. Or I guess I could join the Zoom. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Do you know how to minimize the participants?
Yeah, sorry.
Change the view.
Yeah.
And on the key to the view up at the top, right? There you go.
It's just the Zoom was so hard.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna point to it. Why don't we try to see this, how this works? Ooh, that's
Is
better.
that better?
That's way better.
Okay.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I have up here is the existing conditions and demolition plan that we had pulled together as part of the project. And this is just to give you a sense of kind of the limits of this pavement. I mean, from the beginning, we've been looking at this as a pavement reduction project. We just maybe didn't think it would be quite so much pavement. So this is the proposed plan. So it was over an acre of reduction of pavement from this piece that you see here into our proposed plan. Everything that's in white is basically being converted into prairie and rain garden with additional tree plantings versus the parking lot that it is now. We kept a portion of the parking lot to house, it's a bad word, to park the tiny homes as a staging area for the tiny homes and to kind of make that a little like model home community, if you recall that. So you can kind of see where the area was that we were going to try to just do a mill and overlay of the pavement versus everything else is going to go away. So this is kind of complicated, but after we spoke about a week ago, after we had Shoreline Landscaping had done 3 different test pits, we decided it would be worth going out and doing more test pits, and they took that very seriously. And this is the number. So all the red dots that you see here are the test pits that were dug last week to really try to get a better handle on the real volumes of stuff that was subsurface that we just didn't anticipate. And so you can see it's shallowest. So this is kind of written by, depth. So 10 inches beneath what the existing parking lot surface would have been, but Shoreline had already removed that topmost layer. And so it's, relatively shallow toward the church and then gets a little bit deeper. This blue spot is where our soil boring was. And then this dark gray is kind of crazy deep amounts of.
If it's okay, if I can jump in real quick, Marcy, that depth that you're seeing is both bituminous pavement and sub-base.
Correct.
So for example, in that soil boring, we saw a relatively thin layer of bituminous, like 2 inches, which is pretty thin actually. And then there was sub-base below it, which we see. So something like that isn't, I mean, those are thick layers, but that's not too crazy. What's really significant is that the bituminous depth and sub-base gets really, really deep in that gray area.
Just to clarify, on that one boring in the project area, recognizing it was done for other purposes, what depth Certainly to the depth that
15
you're seeing,
feet,
so well below what. the-
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't that it stopped short.
Yeah,
Mhm.
No,
yeah,
it was
just
plenty
wanted
of-
to make sure. I didn't
Great,
think
good
it did.
question, no, that's a good question, but no, it was plenty deep, yeah.
What did that one show? Cause I mean, it's in between a 28 and a
Yeah.
30.
Yeah.
So, right, so that's interesting too, because it showed 2 inches of bituminous and then a couple feet of silty sand. So I don't know if, and that was from Glacial Valley, is that the name of the company? Anyway, that was the drilling company that looked at it. I don't know if they looked at, if they were seeing sub-base or kind of a strange sub-base and classified it as silty sand or what, but it certainly wasn't 2 feet of bituminous. So,
Have you guys, this is, I get why they spread out, I like the distribution. Have y'all thought about boring in some of those thicker areas? It's a little suspicious to see something that thick. A gray area, 58
very-
inches,
yeah,
at
it's
5
very-
feet.
Yeah, it's very, and that's what those are test pits that.
they're open.
When we say, but when we say test pits though,
Like
it's not
that
a
picture they're showing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's holes like that all
It's
over
open
it,
excavation.
yeah.
But is it hiding something below all of that bituminous?
Well, there is a concrete vault.
Yeah, that's
Well,
odd.
I was trying to.
Yeah, I
What other things are we?
They went until they got to what they thought was
Yeah, they went down until they got to the clay,
To the
that,
clay.
yeah,
Okay,
that
so
seems to be the
That's
native.
the deep of the.
Yes, he
depth
dug
of
down,
the-
this is what, this is, yeah, these are what these test pits look like.
It's a real mystery as to why.
Yeah, and so we've been trying to kind of do some forensic analysis here over the last couple of weeks, to try to better understand what decisions were being made. I mean, we can't know what decisions were made other than at some point the owners chose to bury layers and layers of parking lot. It would be more clear, I think, if it had just been like, oh, a whole bunch of extra aggregate underneath, but you can see in this picture, where it's, a full parking lot stacked on top of another full parking lot, and in some cases more. Additionally, so I don't know if that's in this, oh, this is. So there was a portion of the site where they unearthed a concrete slab. That was somewhat unexpected. So again, we went back to our historical aerial photos. And so I do have, so that's what's kind of marked out here. So there was a shallow, what we were calling a vault, and then a little slab. And so we went back to our aerial photos. When we did the initial aerial photo analysis, really what we were looking for was anything that looked like it might be a wetland or anything, because the church had some concerns about water under subsurface. Somehow there was maybe water stuff going on. We checked on the work that had been done at Aldrich and didn't find anything there. And then through our historical aerial photos, we didn't find anything that would lead us to believe that this would have hydric soils or be a wetland. Now they are clay soils, so that presents its own challenges. But so this was a 1953 aerial photo, and we had done a series of these, but I pulled out this one specifically as we were then going back to try to figure out what the heck this concrete piece is on this site. So this is from 1966. And I did notice that there is an error. I had put in the memo, I had put that this had been a Slumberland Furniture. It was actually a Shoppers City, which was a precursor to Kmart. And then, there's this strange little structure up on the corner of the site, that the roof line just made us question like what this thing could be. Because all of the parking lots were all in a similar footprint where they stopped about midway. So if I can draw a
Where were you
picture.
looking at aerial photographs? Because when I pulled this up, I was specifically drawn to that. And the aerial imagery you pulled was from Google Earth. And it's not really a satellite, it's more of an oblique photo.
Mhm.
So I immediately went to the Ramsey County historical photos, and that parking lot shows up in 1973.
Yeah, think she'll show that here too. She
Yeah.
said that.
Okay.
Yep. And so we were trying to unearth what this structure could be, and this is what we think it may have been. Which is, sort of I'm gonna call it a pop-up car wash.
Mark
Where,
recognized it, Mark just had a look of recognition.
Well, there is maybe not similar, but there is a car wash in that vicinity.
really,
Not going too far. I live in the area, I've lived in that area for like 32 years. I've seen like 4 different
Yeah.
establishments. It's had some history definitely, but that looks like a car wash type thing that I wonder if they moved to the south and abandoned this. Is there any evidence that maybe things like this might have just been pushed over and just left rubble? I mean, so what I'm really asking is, are these various layers and it's mostly bituminous other than the one area of concrete, it sounds like, are they fairly contiguous or are they patchy?
I mean, without having excavated more, we've been looking at it a little bit piecemeal in the, how the pits are being done, right? But we can infer from the depths, that there were some, perhaps this was an original parking lot and then at some point it expanded. We think that at some point, so I was going to show, so in this aerial photo, I also pieced in, so this was in a 1991. So you can again see that the main parking lot stopped about midway, but then it had expanded out to its current footprint around 2002.
So did
That
you see
parking-
something else?
That parking lot in 1991 is there. This is a really poor photograph. I was surprised to see you using Google Earth. Google was not founded until 1998. Their satellite imagery didn't start till a couple years later. Their historical photos were crowdsourced and not historically shouldn't be counted on. So I was surprised that was a source photo. Because if you go to the county website on ArcGIS, we have free satellite imagery going back to like 1940. You pull up 1991, that photo even looks like it's from 1960.
Right.
Pull up 1991, you can clearly see parking stalls, so I kept going back. 1985, there's a parking lot. 1973, there is a parking lot. And then back to like 1960 something, there is not.
Okay.
So that parking lot has been there since at least 1973, all the way to that north corner.
All the way up.
Yes, there even used to
Interesting.
be an exit drive up there. And you start to see like right where in 1973, where those roof lines are, is gone, and there's kind of a gravelly patch. I would suggest looking at the county aerials.
Sure.
They
Noted.
provided me with a lot of insight, but it's definitely a lot older than that.
Sure. So we were we were speculating that, because you can kind of see the footprint of what, this little gray blob is similar in location to where we think where the car wash had been. So presumably at some point they had decided, well, because there had been over a foot of clay that had been put on top of that concrete. So we did find that during the test pits. And so at some point they decided to just cover that up and then extend the parking lot up above that. So presumably that changed, how deep things were at that site.
Marcy, as you guys looked at some of those, do we have, and I don't know the details on it, do we have evidence of the elevation change over time? Because it seems like they would have,
It's weird.
they increased the elevation by like 5 feet. Is that something on the public records? I just don't
You
know.
can't really see elevation. You can see where that concrete area is. It's like they kind of paved around it and they kept maybe intending to do something with it. And then all of a sudden they're like, just pave it.
It's like they were grading with bitumen.
Ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness, not permission
That's what I was curious.
Yeah.
type of deal.
Yeah.
That's
And the
consistent.
whole site is built up a bit from the road. So if you assume that initially when they built the parking lot, that it had more of a, you know, it was more in line with the same elevation of the road. It's certainly built up now. Even the boulevard space that is left is quite high, relative to North St. Paul Road.
And I mean, that's very curious and it's very interesting to
Yeah.
understand, but I mean, we're still left with,
Yeah, it
this
doesn't
is our
change.
current condition and how do we want to move forward?
Right.
And I think some of the questions what we're trying to dig at, and this is just where my head was at the end, is what other little things are gonna find, and so as you guys have looked and researched, I know removal of that is something that's necessary for the program, or the project, sorry, for the project.
Yeah.
But it just begs the question of, oh man, that was a rough find, what are
Yeah,
the finds
it is
you're
a
gonna
rough
have?
find.
My question goes to, have you done or attempted a boring at that very odd location? Because I'm almost thinking there's a vault under there that they didn't want to deal with and they were told they had to, and someone just paved over.
Well, they did find the vault.
There
They
is a
did find
vault.
it?
Yeah, you want to mention that briefly, Marcy?
That was that blue box earlier that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was just a little spot you can kind of see here where it had and it's fairly shallow, where it had small CMU block, that was holding up a little bit of so it's like the solid slab is back here, but it had sort of a lid, is how I was envisioning it, set on top of these CMU blocks. And Shoreline was able to, because they kind of had chipped it when they looked at this, they were able to kind of peek in there, without entering the space. And there were signs of some pipes. And Stefan, feel free to jump in if I'm stating this incorrectly. But there were some pipes. I mean, it gave a sense of, that this was used as a vault of some sort. But for
Done
what?
any type of testing into that vault to see if there's some type of contaminant that needs to be removed before you can put a public space on top of it? I mean, is it a brownfield at this point? We haven't gotten that far.
Right.
Where prices are gonna go more than just $200,000 to remove, it's gonna be $1 million to remediate.
What we saw in the vault was, a lot of soil, the walls of other walls of the vault had been crushed or caved in. And so there wasn't a huge void, but there was some, like an old iron pipe, maybe 3 inches in diameter. Interestingly enough, there was a 1-inch poly pipe in there. So there wasn't I didn't see a lot of pipes, but you couldn't necessarily tell what was inside the vault because there was some, soil kind of pushed in a few of the exterior walls.
Did it seem, just in terms of its location, did it seem associated with that area that was maybe a car wash at some point? I'm wondering if they detained their wash waters. I think that, regulations were probably way different back in the 60s, 70s. But even at that time, they may have had to had a detention of their wash waters. I don't know. Trying to come to some speculative what this vault might be. And, to Ben's question of, is there a high likelihood of contamination? Understanding the nature of the vault might contribute some, understanding whether or not that's a concern.
And to build,
There's concern on my mind of the unknown at this point. Even reading the request, it's like, we want to approve up to $100,000, like we don't even have a change order for what this cost truly is yet.
I was feeling
Is
something.
that correct?
Well, and it's not our project, right? So this is
Yeah.
the church's project, they're
Yeah.
asking for
Yeah.
more funds to continue. So
Yeah.
we wouldn't see a change order
Well, but
necessarily.
they probably would, and that's why there's the
Like-
unknown of how much the grant would be for.
Well, the grants, we're asking for 100,000.
Well, it reads as, 50% of the additional costs up to 100,000.
Right.
So there's an unknown there.
Yeah, which is always hard, grants read, so it's always up to, right, cause we only pay for what's actually completed, so
Yeah.
that would be the maximum that we would pay as something.
And I think, Marcy, is that a good time to talk through the options? I think that might help answer Ben's question too.
Well, yeah, so we've been trying to think through scenarios of, what we can do to either keep the project moving forward as designed, or what would it be to, like, what if we just put the parking lot back? It's a lot of pavement, it's a lot of curbing. There's, we'd have to do some calculations, but then, so let's say that that's a scenario. Scenario A is we cover it back up, we repave the parking lot. Scenario B is we look for opportunities to reduce the excavation. So perhaps the paved area gets bigger, so that we don't have to dig out quite so much. The rain garden, we need to get bigger. We can't tell without full redesign and cost estimating if that would end up being a wash or if that would be beneficial to the total project cost. Assuming that we have clean soils and we can just excavate it all. The church's preference was to not cover it back up and not put another Band-Aid on what appears to be years of decisions to, cover this thing up. So their preference was to try to maintain the design as is, but maybe we can play with, the elevations of the grade. Maybe we can bring in less fill. Maybe we can, once it's excavated, shoot points to try to bring things closer so that we're not having to haul in other fill. I mean, it's a, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, and to some extent. Stefan has, so Bar created a 3D model, utilizing all of these points to help estimate the volumes that we think that we would need to remove from this site and subsequently bring back in as fill. So Stefan has been kind of noodling on those numbers and trying to figure out the most efficient way to try to deal with that, again, assuming that that these are clean and can just be excavated and disposed of. So preliminarily, we felt like the 200,000 mark is in the ballpark as we fine tune these options. Are there pieces that can be salvaged and used as fill elsewhere? So we're, throwing out a lot of options to try to keep the project going. But at the end of the day, it's stalled right now as we try to chart a path forward.
So I have a question on that, Marcy, so I'd like the purpose of what they're trying to do, but it feels like the time to go slow and investigate a little bit. And I get a sense that the contractor yourself, many people have thrown in a lot of time the last 2 weeks and have solutions, but I definitely have some hesitance in terms of, like, have we done enough of the discovery process? Should we slow down a little bit just to ensure that we do have our ducks in line? I think I'd be more comfortable approving grant funding or approving funding of some order that allows us to ensure and build confidence in the strategy looking forward. That's kind of where my head was at when I read some of this. And I do know it's a couple weeks old, and I don't like the idea that it's stalled for long, but when I looked at the pictures, it really called into question of, did we spend enough time now that we've learned something fairly sizable looking for other things?
To me, it sounds like there's still a big unknown. Even if you do that discovery, if they see any oiling or sheen, it is going to require remediation and cost. So I don't know that that's a decision the board should be making the church follow through it, because that's going to be a large cost that through the SWIP you are required to do this. So my mind is at the same point as you, but is that our funding? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a totally worthwhile discussion, but I would be more comfortable throwing money that direction, but if it's not
Yeah.
our call, because it's, when you say the word stall, and that's what triggered this comment. Is it stalled because we can't spend the money toward this, or what? Is it stalled because we just don't have a plan? Have we done enough where we feel confident that we have an idea and it's just not coming across in what was written? What we're talking about? I don't get a good sense on those things.
Well, I guess I'll let them speak, but I would say it's a budget thing, right? So you plan budget per project and then you find out there's at least $200,000.
Yeah,
So then the church, you know, as we're working with the church on this, they want to understand, is there, you know, what is the district willing to contribute, and then what is the church able to contribute as well
well,
for their project.
I think directly it's like the confidence that I have in contributing the money isn't there, given what I've read.
Right.
I guess I think there's enough potential risk. I don't think that that's necessarily a realized risk at this time, but it seems that we should have a better understanding of what the more complete picture looks like. I would be more in favor of some portion of our resources helping to investigate this further.
So I mean, all of those were tests, I mean, those were all
Yeah.
dug on the site. So I'm just wanting to try and understand what else you would want them
Well, those are dug down to
to the native
To
soil.
clay.
Yeah, to the clay soil.
Yeah. so
Have they opened the vault and
That's kind of
looked
my-
into it?
I mean, that stuff I think it would be their responsibility,
Yeah.
right, as part of the project and the contractor's project.
I mean, it sounds like they've looked into it, but the more you dig, 'cause they're gonna have to dig the whole thing.
I know.
Well, great,
Well, I guess they wouldn't
So-
have to, they could.
those are
look
the
at other
options.
ways around it.
if there isn't contamination, you could
You
potentially
probably
fill that
could,
vault.
yeah. And if there's wash water, you're probably not going to see it.
Yeah, I would throw it. The more recent tubing I found quite interesting.
I think some of the things to remember too is that we're looking for the end, we're paying for the
The end
BMPs and results, right?
Yep.
And so in order to get there, are we willing to contribute more funds, and how they do that and what their responsibilities as the landowner and applicant are.
Let me lay it a different way. So if we give the go for more money and they find something else,
Yeah.
that to me is sunk cost, isn't it? We're not recouping any money if they get
Well,
3/4 of the way
They won't
through.
get money from us because they haven't done the project, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
we reimburse based on completion of a project. So, right, so if they're not able to complete the project,
And this was,
is that what you're?
It's
what
kind
is
of where
the-
I'm teasing it. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure out what happens if we do discover what's the next course of action? How does that impact our decisions? Because they might get halfway through and put in a rain garden, but then they found something else and now there's extra expense. You get it.
Yeah.
Now, I know the
and-
staging of the program is different. I get it,
Right.
but that's what I'm trying to think through.
I guess
Did
I had another.
did you have something, Jonathan?
Well, I had a question, not to further
Yeah,
complicate things, but I'm thinking more about
yeah,
precedent and
Yeah.
future requests. If this had been known at the time they applied and the total project cost was 400,000, the district still would have maxed out 100, right?
Well, that was my
Or-
question, 'cause this was
We already
originally like a
above.
targeted retrofit, and then it became a stewardship grant. We kind of passed it under the understanding that it's kind of both.
Yeah.
So even with this, would it still be under that
so
threshold of a targeted retrofit with this extra $100,000?
So it's a stewardship grant, which has a maximum of 100,000 when it was initially approved, the board approved additional funds on top of that. So
39,000.
From
this
the
would,
stormwater impact.
right, because we had
priority.
stormwater impact, we just said that's the pot of money it would come from, but we did go above and beyond the typical, so it would continue to be above that 100,000.
So for my purposes, I would just want the
if the board decided to approve additional funding, which would not have been approved in the original request.
Might have been,
Might have been.
Right.
Yeah, but per the policy.
because they already did ask for more money and we gave them some money,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So they could have requested 200,000.
Yes.
And then the board would have, decided.
Yeah. And so so the minutes would reflect
Yeah.
whatever discussion led to that decision to go above and beyond what why that departure would happen would be important. Especially in thinking about future stewardship grant applicants, we wouldn't want people to start breaking up their application into different, portions to,
Yeah,
this is obviously a very extreme.
yeah, this is
That
more
unique,
of a,
yeah.
It was-
once we were in the process.
It was a timing thing, but it had been looked at it as a targeted retrofit.
Right.
We kind of discussed that the
Right.
first go around. So
Right.
I mean, if this had been a $694,000 project, or if I got that, $594,000 project, would it still have fallen within that realm of target
Yeah.
retrofit?
Yep, so we would have, originally we had planned to send it through our targeted retrofit, which means we would have bid it, we would have constructed, we would have paid for it outright. Now, if this would have happened under our targeted retrofit, we would have found this, then we would be back, we'd be here still.
We'd be
saying-
having
there'd
this
be a
conversation.
We'd be still having this, but then it would be up to you guys, right, to say, we need to investigate more, like, we gotta make sure this is, but then we would decide, right?
And to
change
take
order.
on the risk of if there are contaminants and it does become $1 million project. So really, the district is in a better position this way. There's less risk.
Do we have the funds for this?
Yeah, we do.
Just to clarify what Tina was saying, district doesn't pay anything until the completion of the project.
We reimburse.
There's reimbursement.
So I do, just on that, because this one is a little bit different, so the board approved us to pay
Oh,
Shoreline ahead of time.
sorry, yep, you're right.
So we have made one payment, or will make, or I think that
I
went
thought we
through
were
this
doing
month.
it to pay like multiple payments over time, that's what I was.
I forgot
recalling.
that this one had.
So that's why I was thinking it was sunk cost, and if we end up paying so much, we discover something, we are out that money.
If they abandon the project.
Correct.
Because of that, yeah. We'd abandon, right, what's already been paid would be paid.
I don't know if Jody or Janice want to chime in here, but I know the church is committed to, they want, like Marcy said, not just to do a Band-Aid, but they want to see this go forward to completion as we had designed, and we will continue to work with Stefan and the church to come up with the best plan going forward.
Yeah, one of the questions I have, and I didn't know this part about this vault and what that means. Again, this is not what we rock and roll in, but are you guys saying that this vault could have chemicals in it that would be another issue?
I think we're saying that it's worth looking into, is that a
Well,
fair way?
that is my fear, is we've only peeked into a portion of it and you get into another portion and there's, motor oil or something. That's
Yeah.
gonna trigger a SWIP requirement where you have to remove and remediate that because you've opened it up. And that can be very expensive because you need to, depending on what it could be found, will dictate the removal procedures through the EPA.
Yeah, that would be something I'd for sure have to talk to my board about, because I did not know this piece of information. But what we are committed to, or want to still continue to see, is a rain garden, which is on the other corner. Where part of what we want to always do is be able to help be environmental friendly as much as we can. And since COVID, churches' attendance is just different. And we just don't need this much parking lot. So we always want to do ways in which we can help improve the environment instead of, we can't ignore that. We know this can improve it. So part of what the board is more concerned about is, can we help have a rain garden there still? The rest of the parking lot, if it's a parking lot, that's what we turn it back into. But the rain garden, would be helpful if that's possible. Again, just I think for the lakes. And one of the things also that we are excited about is not only, of course, a display for the tiny homes to help about homelessness, but also we are excited about getting churches to see a little bit more ways now how they can repurpose their parking lots. Because we're not the only church that's facing less cars coming to the building on Sundays. And I think it's wise if a church can help model ways that we can cooperate with the environment and help with the environment issues that the community faces. And that was one of the driving forces of why we wanted to do this.
I think your mission is really sound, honestly.
But again, not knowing all this other stuff was there.
On looking at, does all the pavement have to be excavated prior to doing any kind of rain garden work?
It doesn't look like it from where the vault is. If they chose like that middle of the option road where, you know, we don't want to get into this, we'll repave and bring the water down to that southeast western corner to the rain gardens. It could still be accomplished. But you know, that's a decision that, you know, their board would have to undertake as what plan we move forward with.
I wish there was a way to divide some of these sections in different parts. For example, if you do the southern section first, I'd feel more comfortable looking at how the pavement was. And okaying a pavement removal in that were less than like a foot, maybe a foot and a half, seem less daunting and gets us to some of the BMP work.
Yeah, I guess just where I'm at is I commend you for carrying this project forward. And personally, I would be willing to provide additional funding, recognizing this challenge. But I would really like to have a clearer understanding kind of what the end point is, because it seems to me like there either needs to be some additional investigation or there needs to be some revision to the plan going forward in terms of its layout. And I really want to avoid a series of additional changes, you know, change requests. It's not our project. We can always say no in a change request. But it just seems like, given the nature of the challenge, we should have some additional information. That's where I'm at.
So it feels like the additional information you're looking for is around the vault. Is that fair to say?
I think the vault is certainly something that
It's a
should be
top
examined. Yes.
Mhm.
And we're partnering here, right? So I'm actually in the camp of Mark. I have my reservations, but I'd rather see programs like this go through. I would like to find ways to partner and stage it so I have a good sense that we're being good stewards of money. It's truly where I was at. Ben, what do you think?
I'm caught in between both, to be honest, because if there is something nasty in there, it'd be great to get it cleaned up, but that's a huge expense. I'm kind of at the point where they're probably gonna need additional funding, no matter which design decision they undertake, whether they say, you know, let's figure out a creative way to stay away from the vault and still get this BMP to function, or let's go with the original design and see where that goes. So I would hate to.
Ashley has a comment too, if you're.
Yeah, go ahead and make a comment.
No, it was, I think, brought up during the pre-con, but was the 2014 soil boring, did that actually have contamination testing? I know we had looked at like the Aldridge site and there wasn't any contamination there. And there's no past businesses that, like, that contamination history was looked into. Obviously, we found something on site different, but.
Yeah.
Is
No,
that,
not that I don't think so. Marcy, there was never.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
No, and we did know at Aldrich, we started excavating a rain garden, and I mean, Dave can speak to this more, but we hit contamination in one spot. And that hasn't been seen at all. Right, Stefan, I think you've dug enough, you would have unleashed, at least for what we found in Aldrich, that would have shown up.
What's up, Dave?
I had a question in regards to the vault, and could you drill almost just like a 1-inch hole and like just peek at it, or is it once you actually touch it or do anything like that to see if there's anything in it, or is it just a slab? Are you pot committed to excavating the whole thing once you do that, or can you just put a small scope camera in it and just see like, hey, what is it?
Once you've discovered suspected contamination, you're kind of on the hook. So
That's kind of what I thought, but yeah, I was just curious.
See something, you're legally are supposed to report it.
And just to be clear, to this point,
There's been none.
Yeah,
There's been none.
yeah.
How do we do that, like a forced vote, just to figure out where we are? There's a Rogers rules.
Roberts.
Robert's rules. No, his brother Roger. There was a
I
practice.
think you can call for it. I think
You
you
can
can
just
call.
say where you vote right now without an official vote.
Yeah, can we do just a round vote? Yeah.
Or just, ask, I guess.
Yeah, so why don't we do
Can
that?
we get one clarification, like the stewardship fund that this would come out is healthy, we don't expect it to draw down, we've got the funding, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right, so let's just get a sense of where we are. What do you think about okaying extra?
I'm okay with it, because we're already kind of into it, and they are committed. It does improve water quality. It was kind of in that, I'm in the same spot that we voted last time. It was gonna be target retrofit, then it wasn't, so I would say yes.
Mark?
I'm comfortable with awarding additional funds and sharing the burden. You know, the church is going to put up the other half. I say that with a degree of hesitancy that I just think for the benefit of the project, there really should be a serious discussion if there's. They need to really assess if the project design as originally envisioned is the best course forward, even with this additional funding, or is there something that they want to look at or redesign? That's where I'm at. So I think we have the money. I think it's a great project. I really commend them. I would vote yes. They could have an additional $100,000.
I'm on the same page with, I just want more transparency, and the money comes with additional streams, if that's comfortable, where we get more updates with final designs to ensure that the BMP is going to be as effective as the money.
Yeah.
putting in.
Yeah, I think, we're partnering really closely with them, and we have through this whole project. So I think, I trust that our staff and the church staff, and, we already have Shoreline working there too, that we can come up with a solution that, meets all of our needs.
I just want I want increased transparency as we go, not that there isn't one.
To give more information.
I need more.
Yep.
And that $100,000 I know is just an estimate to the ballpark, so I'm very interested as plans mature what it ends up being.
Yeah.
So why don't we do this? All in favor of the stewardship grant budget adjustment request 2416? Can I get a motion to approve budget adjustment request 2416?
I will motion to approve the budget request for 2416.
I will second that.
Okay. I definitely want it noted about the extra information as it comes through, but as for the next time, I agree. So all in favor, say aye.
I have one question. A very quick question. I've already said I live in the area. I drive by this almost daily. There's a lot of soil that's on site that is under plastic. Is that just to prevent it moving off site erosion? Is that the reason for the plastic in the piles?
That's a good question for Stefan.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct. It's just to keep it's been raining so much. We just wanted to get ahead of it, prevent any erosion. So that's all it's about.
It's good BMP. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you, that was a good discussion.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Let's jump to the budget status update. I do appreciate the changes that you added there. I think it was requested Mark made. It adds clarity.
Just to highlight, so there was an increase there in the homeowner projects. I think they were all staff approvals, or I don't think I know they were all staff approvals. So budget's still looking good there. One note on the aquatic vegetation harvest, you'll note that it still says 0. I did this spreadsheet before I did the approval, so that's just missing on this spreadsheet. And then it's my understanding that the extra 100 would come out of that priority area projects. So even with the extra 112,000, we're still sitting at 500,000. So, which is pretty good we're halfway through the year and we have the funds. So.
Can you briefly say something about the 2 additional public art projects?
No additional public art projects.
Carried forward from
Those are all-
previous,
those are all-
okay.
Yeah, so those are total,
Okay,
total numbers from last month compared to this month.
carried forward.
Yep, so yeah, so no changes as far as the commercial school large property projects, other than that aquatic harvesting one and then the Woodland Hills site. So, that said, I do have a handful that'll be on next month's board, so.
Great,
That's great.
awesome.
Janice, Stefan, yeah, I don't think you guys have to stick around. We did approve.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, enjoy.
It'll be fun to discover.
It's a journey.
It's a journey.
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yes,
Thank you.
thanks.
Action items. Get
Yes,
into the Beltway. Let's do it.
yeah, so, Erin, are you covering that one?
Yeah, so you see the request for board action in the memo from Nathan Campo. I mean, the main, I think you probably all recall that there was a failure down right near the river. And so there's been a lot of work to design how to fix that. There was a big sinkhole found, and so the bar team led by Nathan Campo designed the repairs to fix that failure, and then the project went out to bid. And at the time, so at the June meeting, you were presented with plans and the engineer's opinion of cost for that project. And at that time, BAR's opinion of cost, the median point was 968,000, and you see a range there. We always give you that range that ties to any of the uncertainty left in the design. And then the bids were opened on June 28th, and the low bidder was a little bit higher than our opinion of cost. Still, essentially, at the top end of that range, but still a little high. And so Nathan, in the board packet, outlines why he thought that might be. It's been very wet. That portion of the Beltline's actually submerged right now, and that the level's coming down, but it's quite possible that the contractors are trying to be a little careful with their bid prices, and so you see that here. Menger Construction is a company that we're very familiar with. They've been involved in these types of projects before. And so we do think that they are the lowest responsible bidder. And so we don't necessarily see a reason not to award to them. Is there anything else I can answer for you? That's
One
kind of the
comment.
highlights, yeah.
I do appreciate the call out that they've worked on an intercept before.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't have any questions.
I don't have any questions either. I appreciate the I guess, added comments, context about why they may be somewhat
Sure.
high. That's
Yeah.
that is very helpful.
We like them to be within our range,
Or below.
or below, yeah, for sure, but yeah.
There have certainly been others that have been over,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
in recent project proposals, we've been pleasantly surprised
Yeah.
with bids being kind of well below.
Yes,
And
yeah,
I've
it's a
been-
little all over the place right
Yeah.
now. We've had some low ones, and this one is a little higher, but I think, this this project is right down on the river and it's been very wet and it's a tough spot to work in. So I think you're seeing some reaction to
And
that.
it's certainly a project that we obviously are committed to.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And the fact that the three bids were fairly
Yeah.
close to
Yep,
each other.
that's
I think,
reassuring.
is reassuring.
Yep.
And they all seem. So, one thing on this one, and I know our process is to pick the lowest responsible bidder in this case because of the criticality of it. Is there flex in that if we knew one had more than another, thinking from an experience standpoint?
I don't think so.
That's
Right.
It's really,
Period.
unless there was, you'd have to have a pretty good rationale to say we don't believe that they are responsible.
Okay, so it's more proving that they're not responsible.
Right.
Understood.
The burden is.
I just
would
wanted
be
to
on the
add some
district.
clarity there.
Yeah.
Cool. So do I have a motion to accept the bids and award the Beltline Mississippi River Branch Outlet Replacement Project to Mingo Construction Company, Inc., direct staff to prepare and mail the notice of award, prepare agreements, and review the required expenses?
I will.
You can say so moved.
Yeah, I'm so moved.
Cool.
Second.
Perfect. All in favor, say aye.
I was looking for that language.
No, you're good, man. I'll read it quick. I got it. Let's go to action item 7B. This is the Carrilla Resolution 2402. Who wants to
Yes.
tackle
So
that one?
Erin's gonna start it off, and I think Lauren can add to it as well.
Right.
But give you some background on what's been going on since last. board meeting.
Yeah, so your question, Val, it's as if you knew we were going to this resolution. You know, when we bid the Woodbury Target project, our low bid was low by quite a lot. And it was by a company we had never worked with before, brand new, relatively speaking, a company trying to get into the watershed work world. We asked for references, we reviewed their bid, the references came back. You know, these folks are new, they need some extra handholding, we got the project done, so there was nothing particularly damning. Nothing that felt comfortable rejecting the low bid, and that this is where it's tough in the public arena. There's quite a lot of burden to say no to a low bid. So we met with them, we walked through the bid, we explained why some of those bid items seemed a little low. Are you sure you want to proceed? Yes, for sure we want to proceed. And so off we went. And you remember when we brought it to the board, we hadn't finished checking references yet. So we did that, did the notice of award and moved on. And so then the project got underway, and within the first month, which, you know, the project hasn't been going on in full force for very long. It's been going like a month and a half or so. Let's see what days Dave is on. Okay, good. But it seemed pretty clear right out of the gates that these guys were pretty green. It's a very young company, and they have done excavation projects. They've done pipe and structures. They were going to be working with some subs that we recognized, but there was a lot of handholding that needed to happen. And so we were committed to working with them through all these things. But as time went on and as the project got more complicated, as we got to, you know, we worked through the excavation of the rain gardens and the placement of some of those materials. But when we got to the placement of the pipe and the structures, in a retrofit setting, in a parking lot like Target with the vertical tolerances that we have, it's very difficult work to get that just right. And so there was a critical day where structures got placed after a lot of difficulty, and we had to have them take them out because they were not the right elevation. And we had warned them, we need to stick to our tolerances that are in the contract because this is no joke. It's very important. So at that point, they were pretty dispirited, and there was a critical conversation between the owner of the company and Dave on site, where it was basically like, what's the plan? What are you going to be able to do this? What should we be doing? And it became clear that they had lost faith in their ability to do the project, and we had really struggled. And I will say, I mean, from bars, you can see this on the invoice, you know, our construction observation budget is much higher than it normally would be because of a lot of handling, a lot of time on site. So the decision was made essentially we consulted with Lauren and Tracy about what options there might be. And I mean, I guess maybe I'll hand it over to you, Tracy, at that point.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
essentially, the options for the contract document are to voluntarily terminate the contract, and everyone agrees we're just gonna be done, we're gonna go our separate ways, or to terminate for cause. Which factually, there's probably sufficient ground, but, that's a much more extensive process and would have only caused a greater delay. So as long as the contractor was on board to walk away and we were prepared to move forward with another contractor, that seemed like the best option. So, the contractor had an attorney who, I communicated with, and we came up with everyone's help of a voluntary termination contract, which then was signed last Wednesday. Just setting forth that this was a voluntary departure and releasing further claims by either party, except for any omissions or acts by the contractor that result in future harm. But essentially to just say, we both agree this is the right choice to move forward. And then there are certain payments that are recommended to Carrilla for materials purchase that can actually be used going forward, and for completed satisfactory work.
So one of the pay applications that you approved was the second payment application to Carrilla. These were things that we had approved in the field. They had done that work. They deserve payment. So that's for materials and labor for things that they had already put in place. So, but yes, there are stockpiles on site. There's soil, there's mulch, there's ductile iron pipe and things, trench drain materials that Peterson will be able to use. So
Does the completed work change Peterson's bid?
yes, yeah,
Did that
so
come down from where?
yes. So Katie Turpinagel, Bar's project manager on the project, has been working with Brad Nelson, I think is his name, with Peterson to do an adjusted bid tab, basically. They are mostly sticking to their original unit prices where that makes sense, where there's still materials and labor to be paid. But yeah, it's an adjusted scope. So it's what would happen if you all approve is that we would move to award the project to Peterson, and then you would see a change order number 1 right away that would be basically defining how the project has changed. They've already been working on their new bid tab for that, so they're already in process. And so, the price of the project, I don't have a bottom line today. This is all kind of moving, but they're basing their bid items on their original unit prices. But there is there's another mobilization now, so that's an inefficiency. And then the purchase of the materials. So ultimately, it will be a different contract price. We'll have a better sense of that next month. We're hoping that we can move forward to get them out there though, because the site is sitting.
So are the purchased materials on site transferring between contractors, or are we gonna be buying them twice?
We would buy them, but we wouldn't buy them twice, just once, because we had not paid Carrilla yet.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, nope,
Transferring.
the way we like to do this and the way our contract language is set up is that we pay for work that's complete and implemented. So we would typically not buy ductile iron pipe and then pay. This is a little different because we have a transition. So some of the items on Peterson's new bid form are just labor for the iron and hand sand because it's sitting out there on site. So the district would pay either next month or the month after, depending on how fast we can get things shaken out. You would see a pay application go to Carrilla, and that would be for their materials and if there was any additional work that we should pay them for between this last pay app and now.
And do you want to back up a little bit and talk about how the emergency situation and that how we found Peterson meant?
Do you want to talk about
So from my standpoint, it's kind of two separate things. So we have the voluntary termination with Carrilla, which then leaves us with this disturbed open site. So it was our recommendation and validly under the emergency statute to say, we need to treat this as an emergent situation. We can't put it out for public bid again. There's concerns for property and safety. So Bar reached out to Peterson, who did submit an initial bid when it opened in February. But based on the history, the fact that Peterson has worked on other target specific projects before, seemed like a wise choice. And so it really is like two separate analyses. So the first is releasing Corilla. The second is addressing the emergency situation and getting Peterson in there.
Was Peterson the next lowest?
No.
Or someone between?
There were a few between. So the next lowest was another company we had never worked with. And then the third was, I think, Shoreline actually, and then Sunrem and others. And Pearson actually had an error on their bid too. So if you look back, you'll see that they look really high. They actually had an error that's now
Is it?
a significant error.
Who had the error?
Peterson did, so it made their price really high
Yeah.
by mistake. So that's now
They corrected
corrected.
it for the price.
Yes. But the reason we didn't just go with the next in line is because of this emergency situation, because we're like, we need a known commodity that can get in here and get this done as fast as possible.
Yeah, scheduling was a huge.
Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, so that's why it didn't just go, and this
And
is one of the
there's
things we talked
no-
about.
Yeah, no responsibility of the district to choose the next lower. So that's why you really have to think of it as, you know, I think that's what's done with the failed fight in Mississippi, right? It's like there is an emergency situation, the district needs to address it. So we are really treating it as separate from the initial bidding process.
I think I heard, I just want to confirm that Peterson is aware of all the materials that are
Yes.
available, and that would meet their expectation specifications. They have no issues.
Well, so I think mostly the answer to that's a good question. Mostly the answer is yes. They've been out on the site. Dave met with them. Dave, do you want to speak to that? Like, do you walk them through the site and their take on some of the materials that are there?
Yeah, we walked the whole site and looked at everything, counted, measured pipe and all that stuff. And we wanted to make sure they're comfortable with stuff on the site and the equipment that they're given in the ground and for us. So if there was anything that they did not feel adequate or for some odd reason, say, let us know. And they looked at pretty much everything and said, no, we're good with this. There was one structure itself that was a little cracked. That's like, if we're gonna go new, let's get a brand new one here, because this one, it could have worked if we were going this way, but if we're going, let's get it done 100% right versus, making it work type of thing. So I guess that's a long-winded answer for, they looked at everything, they were fine with it. They're good with paying for the cost of it or using the stuff on the ground.
If they accept it, if they find it suitable, then the district would pay for those materials and then Peterson would install it and the district would pay Peterson to install.
Right.
But we are gonna be walking this blurry.
But if
edge
if
for a
they
little
don't
while.
find it,
We would go by their unit prices, I was.
then we would,
Well, but they're
would we
two.
pay Corilla for
Yeah, exactly. There are two
No.
parts here.
If
Okay,
there's
yes,
stuff
okay.
if there's stuff that Bar would reject.
Yeah.
We won't pay Corilla. If
Okay.
there's stuff that Peterson would not, this is a little speculative, but if there's stuff that they say, we're not comfortable using that, then, Bar and the district would have to take a hard look at that and be like, should we really be paying Corilla for this then? Or is
Yeah.
there something inherently wrong? So I think there's a couple things that I already know we won't pay Corilla for. By and large, I think we all feel pretty confident that most of the things out there are just fine.
Yeah,
But this is the kind of thing that we're gonna see for a couple months now. We're gonna see a little bumpiness, like you're gonna see probably some change orders for like, oh, this is topsoil. It's not a lot of topsoil, but it's a little because there wasn't enough there. And we would already talk that through with Peterson that what might make sense there is if they're not sure if there's enough quantity on site, they're gonna assume that there is. Their bid item is for their labor, and if they have to order more, we'll pay for the price of the material plus 10%. So there will be an upcharge on the material, but that's pretty typical. And it's also efficient. So we've talked through some of that. So you are gonna see you'll see some change orders, but we feel pretty good about the initial back and forth with Peterson and the numbers they're coming up with now. I mean, the district will end up spending more than they would have with Corilla, but it seems like it's landing in a reasonable spot and probably still slightly under what our opinion of cost was, which also feels good. Although, as we were saying before, bids are all over the place. So,
My next question is kind of about money in the sense that this is a targeted retrofit, we can expect that this is going to be a higher cost.
Yep.
Yeah.
At project end. There aren't any questions or issues in the budget for
No, because
targeted
actually we
retrofit, right?
budgeted, quite a bit more. We
Right.
expected to
That
pay
there
a
would be-
lot more for
It
this
was
project.
between like 898 or 776 or
Yep.
898 was the.
That
Yeah,
was
right,
the,
cost.
but our budget was actually over 900,000, so we have plenty in the budget for
Yep.
this project.
Yes.
and that seems very reasonable that we'll come in below that, even with, we're seeing these changes, so it feels like a good transition.
Can I put Lauren on the spot a little bit really quickly? As I was looking at some of this just now, and I apologize that I was multitasking. So Peterson Company was 16 out of 18 bids initially,
That was
With
with
an
the
big error.
incorrect, yeah.
which I'm good with. We don't typically allow people to correct errors even with bids, right? So if, for example, if diversified drainage ended up having an error in theirs that made them lower, like that doesn't set a precedence. I know it's an emergency situation, but as I look through it, I mean, their bid went down over $100,000.
Right, 'cause they had a
Huge error.
Yeah.
They dropped, they would have been number 7. in
Yeah,
the
they
bid
would have been
line.
number,
Yeah.
But to your point, I see what you're saying.
I'm just,
about
I wanna make
generally,
sure
No, the deadline.
we're covered
is
by
set.
the emergency.
Yes, so I have no concerns
That's
with
what it
it in this situation. In others, yeah, that bid deadline is firm.
Right.
That would be different
Yeah.
rules.
I just wanted, I don't know, I haven't been around when we've activated the rules, so I just
Yep.
pressure testing.
No, it's a really serious formal process when we would never have allowed Peterson to fix their bid. It was just too bad. They didn't even ask, because it's not legal.
Does this change or the perception of like a Sharam, like the other companies, would this, how do we deal with those relationships if they want to bid later? Is there anything that we should do, or is this because I just don't want to say, oh man, they picked Peterson, I don't want to bid them anymore, or I'm gonna bid them a little higher, or there's several names here that I
We
recognize in
can't-
terms of contractors. We can't
Yeah.
control it, but I'm just trying to
Yeah.
figure out the secondary ramification.
No matter who you pick, contractors are gonna have those feelings.
Yeah.
You can't control it.
I don't work with the so I don't know, I just ask.
They all think that we have a favorite. There's a few men.
And word does get around, so it's.
There's, yeah, I
I'm-
mean, we have to, go with who we feel can get the job done the soonest and the best.
I think I'm very comfortable with this, I just wanted to make sure that we're not
Yep.
sitting against
Oh,
this.
that's good.
Okay, do we need a motion for this?
So you'll need a motion to approve resolution 2402.
I would motion to approve resolution 2402.
We'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do you want just one signed copy from the tonight?
Yes.
Sign this real quick.
Anything else you need from the board? Do you think?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Attorney report, Lauren.
Secretary hasn't had much going
Yeah,
on.
very quiet month.
But
Yeah, well, this has been, we don't like to have to deal with things like this, but that is why we're here, so. Happy to help navigate with some really strong partnerships with BARD. Otherwise, I know I have some contract documents, the Cottage Place.
Yep.
Contract documents are in my inbox, so I'll be reviewing those and giving feedback to Paige. Fish Creek. It's been long awaited. I got the appraisals for the easement yesterday.
That's
So
great.
I will be passing them on, and working with probably Dave to, talk to the landowners about purchasing those easements, so. I was excited to see those finally come through, they've been long awaited. Yeah, so unless anyone has any questions, it's been a busy month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yes.
Any questions for Lauren? For board discussion topics, I have one thing that I did want to bring up, and it was, we're gonna wait till, because I'm gonna put Mark on the spot mainly for the review of maybe in the project section, if there's time remaining, on how he felt things went. So maybe so let's hold on that this summer. Thank you. I was just
We can do that.
We've
during-
used a lot of words today.
No, I know, we can do that during the administrator's report,
That's-
so I have a little spot for that.
That's perfect. So let's jump to I want to get through the new reports as we go through. So 10A.
Jay Holly's here, from our engineering.
Yeah, and I'll just, yeah, by way of introduction, so Jay does a lot of work for the watershed district behind the scenes, so it's nice that he can be here to introduce himself. He does a lot of hydrologic and hydraulic modeling. He has worked on P8 modeling in Battle Creek, so he's greatly involved, and especially greatly involved with flood risk reduction stuff with Brandon, so I would say a few words on behalf of Jay.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to-
Yeah, thank you. Should I just?
You can just share your screen then.
We're not a very interactive board, so.
That's promising.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. Here to share kind of an overview of the resiliency study for Battle Creek, Fish Creek, and Snake Creek that we just finalized last month. Been about a year in the process, so it's nice to finally get that to a point to share with you guys here. Just an overview of the presentation, kind of briefly go over the model updates we did to get those and prepare those to do the study. Brief overview of the different system modifications we looked at, some high-level cost estimates, and then just kind of the next steps and prioritization of those projects. So the Battle Creek, Fish Creek, Snake Creek resiliency study was sort of a continuation of the Beltline resiliency study that was finalized in 2020. That study looked at kind of, can you see my pointer?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Looked at the kind of the northern 2/3 of the watershed, this area up here. So this portion of the study continued on down to the south here. There's definitely a lag there. Kind of the blue highlighted areas. This language here is pulled right out of the report, but basically the purpose of this study was to do a planning level study, looking at kind of the whole system and find impacted structures throughout that system, and then look at, is there projects that we could do there to help remove those habitable structures from the floodplain without purchasing them. That's kind of the parameters of the study. It's kind of a example would be just sort of the district's plan, where you identify big picture projects, and then the next step is to go into more detailed feasibility studies, try to better quantify the costs and things like that. We do have a web map link shown here. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that one before, but this study is now up on that web map with the areas that we studied there, looking at both the kind of the pre-project impacts and then our proposed modifications to address those impacts. This is just kind of, I'm addressed this a little bit, but this is sort of the timeline of the resiliency studies that the district has undergone. 2020, they completed the Beltline resiliency study. In the 4 years since then, many of the projects identified in that study have been implemented or being worked at right now. Phelan Village project up on Lake Phelan, the Phelan Outlet, stuff like that was identified as part of that study. So this study was just completed last month, and now the projects that we've identified in here can now be included when we're looking at what projects to prioritize, kind of combined with that outline resiliency study. So I won't dive too deeply into the details of the H&H model updates. We worked with the various shareholders in the district, the cities, MnDOT, counties, to get the most updated storm sewer data that they have, so that we could add that resolution to the models. This graphic on the right here, this is showing the Tanner Lake watershed. The pink thick lines are what kind of the sub-watershed resolution that was in the models. And then after this update, the yellow lines are what it currently is. So the goal was to try to better capture all the various stormwater ponds, depressions, all these different storage areas throughout the watersheds that maybe weren't captured in the older models.
So the yellow are essentially the updated.
The yellow is what it currently is, what the updated is. So we're now, this area here is a good example where this wetland was really the only storage that was accounted for in this big pink watershed. And now we have all those different stormwater ponds. So we have a much better understanding of how water is stored, how it moves through the watersheds. And we can also better evaluate what structures are impacted. Because before we could only look right around that wetland. And now we can look around all these different individual ponds to see where there might be flooding problems.
That helps clarify. I had a question on that. Thank you.
So, and then just some numbers to kind of show, in the Battle Creek Lake, Tanner's Lake model, we almost doubled the resolution in that model. And then went up by about 70% in the Fish Creek, Carver Lake, Snake Creek model. So the process for identifying those potentially flood-prone structures was, we updated the model. We then ran the 100-year, 96-hour design event storm through the model to establish those elevations in all these ponds. Then we went through a GIS process to map that elevation in each of those watersheds, kind of get that inundation extent, how far out does that water extend there, and then intersected that inundation area with all the building footprints to see what buildings fell within that inundated area.
Jay, did you only run the 100-year, or do you have a sense on where it looks like for a 50?
We ran the whole spectrum, but that 100-year, 96-hour, that's kind of the floodplain elevation that we used to establish.
I was just kind of curious how vulnerable are those even at smaller rain events? Is kind of what I was curious about.
Yeah, we could definitely look at that. We have that data.
Yeah, not needed now. I know. Yep.
And
Yep.
sometimes we get into that in that feasibility as we're.
Right, the next phase, yep. So once we located all those flood prone structures, and by structures, we're not counting backyard sheds, park pavilion, it's places where people live or work on a regular basis. We divided them into two different categories. One was what we call the district flood risk areas, and those are ones that are either on district managed water bodies or near district managed facilities, BMPs, pipes, something where the district has control or interest in that area. The rest are ones that are due to constrictions or something in the municipal storm sewer that's kind of far away from the district projects or water bodies. So for this project, we identified 29 structures in the Battle Creek watershed. And Battle Creek includes both the creek itself as well as Battle Creek Lake and Tanner's Lake. Tanner's Lake flows into Battle Creek Lake and then down through Battle Creek to the river. We've identified 29 structures there that we classified as district. They're highlighted in red here, mostly around the lakes. There's one little cluster up here that's near a district pipe. And then down in the Fish Creek Carver Lake watershed, there was 4 structures down there that fell in that district risk area. The large number and that were classified as local that we did not look at projects to reduce the flood risk on there. Those are all orange squares or orange houses. This slide just kind of illustrates sort of the 3 main categories of the modifications we looked at to reduce the flood risk. We looked at storing more water, whether that was reducing pipe sizes perhaps to store more water upstream if there was capacity there without increasing flood risk there. Is there a way where we could provide more storage? Could we put in big underground tanks or caverns? Could we make a new pond? Another option would be to actively manage or mechanically manage outlets, similar to what is being done in Lake Phalen, where we can actively move that outlet up and down to change and add more storage in there. Or can we back up more water into more green spaces to temporarily store water there? We also looked at changing the direction of flow, whether that was pipes or open channels. Can we send this water somewhere where there is capacity? And then if we needed to increase the conveyance out of an area, increase pipe sizes, something like that, just to move the water out more efficiently. So I won't go into too much detail here. These are much more detail in the report, but in the Battle Creek system, we basically identified 4 different areas with system modifications that could be implemented. These first 3, 1A, 1B, and 1C, are all very linked. If we do one, we really need to do all 3 of them because they are in sequence. So if we do something at Tanner's Lake, we have to do something at Battle Creek Lake to accommodate that additional water. And again, we have to do something at McKnight Basin to prevent increases in flood elevation there. 1D is kind of a standalone project. That's that one that was to the northeast of Battle Creek Lake, up over here. That one could be implemented without the other 3 being done, because it's kind of a self-contained project up there. We also looked at 2 different options for addressing the flooding around Carver Lake. They are independent of each other. One looks more at adding upstream storage. The other one looks more at modifying the Carver Lake outlet and downstream culverts to remove water more efficiently. These are just a couple of example slides. I know it's getting late. I can certainly skip over these if, in the interest of time. These are just sort of illustrating these couple points here. This one here is 1B, looking at the Creek Lake outlet, where we would put in a new outlet structure on the pipe directly over the creek just to increase conveyance there, and then do a bit of grading and stuff to remove that one structure.
This Battle Creek Lake outlet and the Tanner's outlets were in the scope summary that you saw last month, I believe.
Yep.
So that is something you'll definitely see more about.
Yep. In the future. And then this is that more standalone project to the northeast of Battle Creek Lake, where the district has a pipe. It's a district controlled pipe up to here, and that capacity of that pipe causes water to pool up in this intersection and potentially impact the homes around there. So we would need to increase the conveyance out of that intersection and then temporarily store that water here, build a berm. By building a berm here with some culverts, and kind of have rate control so that we don't cause downstream impacts. Be a little bit more of a challenging project. We'd really have to coordinate with I think it's the Apostolic Bible Institute, which owns that property. So it's not on public property, but that's the idea there.
Is that why it's 1D out of curiosity? It's like the cheapest option or things, but it's because of the coordination.
There was no real sequencing to the order of the 1 A, B, C, D. It was more to identify them.
Okay.
In some ways, it potentially has the most cost benefit.
Yeah, it's the lowest cost,
Yeah, because of it's isolated.
Isolated. We're removing 8 houses at much lower cost relative to the other ones. So getting to costs, so we're at the very beginning stages here. We're at like a class 5, so it has a very wide potential cost range here. Projects aren't cheap, as none of these are. For the Battle Creek area to do all 4 of those projects, on the low end, we're looking at perhaps $5.5 million. On the high end, $21.5 million. That standalone project, that kind of falls in a $1 to $3.5 million range. Just to highlight that one. For the Fish Creek Carver, that one has a very wide range too, depending on which one it is. The one option where we add a lot of upstream storage is the more expensive one, just due to the cost of removing a very large volume of material. But again, neither one of them none of them are cheap, but again, these have not been optimized at all. That's kind of the next stage of the project, to do the more detailed feasibility studies, try to get it into more of this class 3 range. And then we can start really doing a cost of the project versus cost of purchasing properties, getting more of that cost benefit.
Which I think it's interesting to think about our process for the beltline areas, right? Where we have done that feasibility, like Jay was saying, and kind of start evaluating, or we do more refined, we have the surveys done, and then we find out, oh, it's not 8 homes, it's 4, this is all that needs to be done, or, you know, there's a lot of whole process. Yeah, whole process.
Yep.
Where we start at the high.
I'm not quite getting that graphic on the right.
Sure.
Can you just kind of walk us through that?
Yeah. So.
No, this is fairly standard for program management.
All right, sorry.
No, but in summary of quickness, as you learn more, you refine. how
Okay.
close you are.
And the
Yeah,
further
it's
we-
really
okay,
about certainty
got it.
and
Yeah, okay,
accuracy.
that's probably all I need.
Well, this is what you see, those annoying, we give you those annoying ranges of price, right? And we usually say, this is consistent with the class 3, 80% design, we're using this.
Yep, okay, thank you.
You bet.
All of you, thank
Yeah.
you.
No worries. When I look at that, I was like, oh,
You're good. So kind of next steps, you know, as we did submit that work order or the work plan for at the Battle Creek Lake, Tanner's Lake, those outlets there. So that's what we're going to be looking at next, kind of process of refining that. There's potentially some water quality benefit to that project that we want to look at more closely. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to gather all the observed data that we need to really do that water quality aspect of the project. So a lot of that work is getting pushed to next year. So it's not going to be a lot of work done on designing this year, but next year we should be getting a lot more updates on that. Could also potentially start looking at that standalone project, that 4th Street project, because that, again, like I said, is a standalone one. So that one we could parcel out. We haven't developed a work plan or anything for that yet, but that's something we could look at. Possibly lower on the priority list is the Carver Lake one, just due to the high expense. And there's only 4 properties on that one versus the 29 up in Battle Creek Lake, but we could start looking at that one as well. And then the final point there was stakeholder review. Review is maybe not the right term because it's more of an ongoing conversation. We've been in conversation with them, and we will continue talking with the cities and the county and everyone.
Yeah, we'll share all the data and,
Yep.
you know, the localized flooding issues, we work with them on those as well.
So something like a number 4, that's when you'll start the refining, is when you'll start engaging the institution.
The ABI.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And doing a survey, doing a specific site survey to verify the low elevations.
One question that I think you answered, Tina, but I'm going to ask you really quickly. So these, now that we've acknowledged that 100-year flood event, these are exposed areas. I assume that's one of the first things we talk through. I think that's typically the process. Forgive me. Now that we've identified habitable structures that are at flood risk, do we bring that forward to the cities so they can define their emergency plans?
Yeah, they'll get this. So last time, at least with the Beltline, we had city-specific, you know, information that we shared with them and met with them.
I just wanted to make sure we had that stated and I internalized it correctly.
And then that also gives them the information about those areas that Jay said are the local structures, just so that they're aware of those areas as well.
Do you need a motion for this? Because I'm a big fan of continuing going.
Yeah, no, this is for your information. Like you've already seen the scope summary for the one project, and we'll start as staff continues to review and meet with our stakeholders, you'll start to see the other scope summaries as well.
For number 2 on your next steps, I love the write-up in the report that highlights the benefit of just monitoring that particular outflow site. And so as you plan through it, there's a lot of value, I think, in that. And so I was just curious.
Yeah, and the water quality, Jay was mentioning the need to do more water quality monitoring on that Battle Creek. I mentioned that in my budget memo, so that's what that was.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't draw that. Yeah. Thank you for sticking around. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jay.
Moving forward to, the other 2 are no presentations or for information as well.
Yeah.
If we do have questions or comments on the watershed, I'm gonna pause. On the Coleman Lake internal load, just in the interest of time, are there comments or questions on that from the board? I only had one, and it's more of like, what drives us to the additional sediment cores? Given, and I'm thinking about this in regards to our long conversation earlier. Is it just better to pay for additional sediment cores?
Oh,
It's task 1B, forgive me.
yeah, no, I see it. It may or may not be necessary. I mean, I guarantee, so Keith Pilgrim and Tyler Olson are on this project, and Keith has designed a lot of different alum treatments. He's sort of a national hero in that regard. And if he thinks more cores are needed, he will ask for more cores.
So
you don't need to be worried about him.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's just that we have looked quite a lot at this lake and in recent years due to some of the other studies that he's done, so.
And we've had report out on it
Yeah,
recently,
yeah.
so
If
I
he
was
won't-
just curious.
Yeah, if he thinks the more, and the reason more could be needed is if he wants to dial in the alum treatment to a smaller portion of the lake or whatever, but yeah, he's not shy. Yeah, don't worry.
Wouldn't have guessed that.
No.
That's my only question.
Yep, that's a good question.
And then any, for C, if I have comments or questions, do I direct them? I can direct them to you, Tina, and you can pass them.
Yep, for the watershed management plan. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a couple just clarifiers that I'm looking for.
Sure.
But I like the way it's written. I believe, given what was written about it, it's been done before in very similar fashion. There's just a couple of things that I was hoping to poke at.
Sure. Yeah, and the one thing I will say about the watershed management plan update scope summary is this is laid out quite a lot like it was done before. There are definitely going to be points in time where district staff, Tina, Paige, may decide to flex or scale back certain elements of this.
Yeah.
This is just the overall framework. And as we go, as things change, we'll keep you updated. But there is a whole series of checkpoints one needs to meet in the process, so.
I went through a very, not deep process, but looking back at certain boards that meetings that I recalled where we talked about, oh, let's put that forward to the plan. And so I just want to make sure that
Sure.
what was listed in there was good. And those are things that
Yep.
I recall. I'm blanking the gentleman's name who came and gave us the
Greg,
gap.
yeah.
Greg, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we have those
Yeah.
captured somewhere. So we'll come back. to
Great,
that.
yeah.
Sounds good.
Any questions from you two on C?
I thought it was well laid out.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Moving to administrative reports. You were on vacation last time.
I was. This was written 2 weeks ago now. So. Yeah, I have my meetings attended during June and upcoming meetings as well. My staff anniversary is the only one.
Yay!
Month, so thank you. Coming up. I guess this is a good spot if you want to talk about the summer tour. I wasn't there unfortunately, but I would love to hear what both of you thought about it. And
Why don't
Have
you
any
talk about the
comments?
sessions quick?
Yeah, so there were sessions in the morning that highlighted projects that other watershed districts were doing. 2 takeaways that I got from those. One, I forget exactly, it was the West Metro, which watershed, but they were looking at chloride and the potential to Bassett, yes, to treat chloride in that affected lakes. And they had a couple of models, I forget the names of the lakes. their treatments were reverse osmosis and like a sedimentation, some kind of agglutination. I forget the exact process. Suffice to say, I found it very interesting. The moral of the story was it's not really a viable technology for a lake. These were relatively moderate sized lakes. But their findings were it could be feasible, something that might be worth considering for, I'll use the term, a really hot storm pond that's relatively localized. The volume is smaller, and if this thing is just keeps pulsing off chloride, that might be something that would be viable. The second session was Coon Creek, I believe, and they were talking about their park management strategy. And it seems like a lot of watershed districts are doing park management, and I thought that their approaches were interesting because they're very different than ours. It's more of a stream type, and you know,
Yeah.
did I say Coon Creek is Rice Creek? Sorry, misspoke there.
I've chucked a few carp in my time.
And it's more, you know, a stream rather than necessarily chain lake type. And they're using electric fences, barriers, and electrical conveyances to try to channel the carp into areas. So it just, I found it interesting, different approaches. Those are the two big takeaways. There was a great presentation on diversity equity of the North Minneapolis WMO, I believe, and how they're really faced with, you know, a very diverse community, and they really want to do this intentionally open and you know, right. And they were more or less acknowledging that you really have to have a lot of interaction and be very upfront. And I think these are things that we're all kind of walking through and continuing to test and learn. So those were the sessions. And then in the afternoon we had tours, and
They were great.
yeah, I think staff did a fantastic job for our portion of the tour. I think that the overall organization of the tour went great. I think we stayed on time, we stayed on focus. I was really impressed with Capital Regions. I knew little about them, and they got some really large scale kinds of projects. Their building is, I always thought this was a great building, but their building is like, wow. They outdid us.
They have iron poured art.
15 years.
Lots of
Yeah.
art. Yeah, you know, it's like, if you haven't been there, which I hadn't, but if you haven't been there, you should go.
Yeah.
To maybe an upcoming Metro watershed.
Yes,
That
there you
would
go.
be and yeah, the Ford project, you know, I kept thinking, wow, my Ford Ranger 2011. You know, last year they roll off, and this is what it is now. You know, lots of water features, and kept kind of saying it's really gorgeous, but the biologist in me kept kind of coming back to, you know, this is kind of an artificial system.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think the reality is that's what they probably have to deal with. I was really hoping we would get inside Alliance Field, you know, on the outside. It was pretty impressive to look down into. I was also hoping we'd get into the underground vault, which is immense, and you know, we had to peer inside. So yeah, it was great. And I think our tours, you know, our stops were fantastic as well. I didn't get the last one. I had to leave after Aaron, Dave, Eric, and Fred, you know, gave lots of highlights on me with Mall. Joe and Pat did a fantastic job. I wasn't in Pat's group, but Joe did a fantastic job at Keller. So they're good tour stops.
Great.
Shows.
Yeah, I really wanna acknowledge Paige's work on this tour. She,
Yeah.
that I volunteered us for and then said, oops, I'm not gonna be here, so I really appreciate, yeah, the work that Paige and a lot of our staff spent on this. I knew that they would show us up.
Oh, they did. Thank you for the summary.
Yeah.
Moving forward to the budget, any questions on that proposal?
Yeah, this is really high level, just here's
Just
the
start.
type of things that you're gonna see. You know, starting next month with numbers, right? So this is, I'm working with each of my program managers, staff to, and with BAR to, you know, come up with those first initial numbers that you'll see next month with also explanations for each of those dollar amounts. So this, if there was anything that caught your eye in this discussion memo, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I think it was well laid out. You covered pretty much what I think we've been talking about and what we would anticipate, so.
It's gonna be a
seemed
big
pretty
build
complete.
here.
Yeah.
I have no questions on that.
Okay.
On the action log, I think I do wanna see us on that shoreland assessments. I don't know if we should push that off, because I also looking at the summary provided by BAR in terms of the plan, we gotta think through a workshop, it sounds like sometime for the end of the year, is that right?
For the, you said the beginning of the year or end of the year?
End of the year.
End of the year.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Yes, and what were you saying about the shoreline?
I was wondering if we should revisit some of these items, knowing that we have to have a couple workshops, and if
Oh,
it makes
right.
some sense to dovetail into workshops, for example, like
Probably.
the PFO update.
Yep.
So that's more of what I was trying to go through.
Sure.
Sorry, again,
No,
tripping
that
on my
makes
words, but
No.
in that workshop, I see at least two of these that we should
Yeah.
probably talk through.
Yep. Yeah, I think the shoreline assessment next steps, I asked Paul, you know, to think about what kind of funding we might
Yeah.
need for that. So just
For
from
a
a budget
budget,
perspective, we might have some numbers on that, but
I figure we'll see that through the budget process,
Yeah.
so I'm okay if that's
Yeah.
summer or fall.
sounds good.
But yeah. Any questions on the actions? Okay. Project and program status reports. Like we do, let's go through them quickly if you have questions. And so as I read through these, I didn't have very many questions this time around. There wasn't a lot of new things. Let's see if I'm lying to you.
Yeah, I read through them. I don't really have any questions. A number of these projects, I'm getting more and more familiar with them. And so it's always good to have the updates. I don't have any specific ones that would call out.
Middles. Oh yeah, Pioneer Park stormwater reuse. What's your next step on that one with Watertronics? For example, we're waiting several submissions from Peterson companies. I didn't know how to internalize that.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's getting to, you know, they're cranking through that project. Things are going pretty well. I think they're just waiting on getting, so submittals from the contractor are just like them telling us in a very formal way exactly what they're providing for us to approve. So this was written by Jennifer Kaler. She's the project manager on the project, and I think she's just saying she's waiting on some submittals. Actually, she's a little frustrated.
That's what I was reading through.
She's a little frustrated, but so she's waiting on some things from them, and then she's waiting on a final timeline from Watertronics. So Watertronics is the company that supplies all of the parts, pumps, treatment stuff all at once. So I think Jen is, she's been really great about keeping this project moving, and I think she's just like, there's a couple last things, and I'm just waiting on a few last pieces. So
Thank you.
I think things are going fine. I think she's ready to keep things moving. So, yeah.
Understood. No further questions.
Yeah.
I actually do, I was scrolling through these and H. Kind of
Oh, shoot, I
lands me in
skipped
a
H.
spot that I've been wondering about. Watershed
Oh, yeah.
for retrofit projects, the WAP.
Yeah,
So a lot of effort went into kind of rolling this out.
Yeah.
And kind of formulating it.
yep,
And I really appreciate that, but having just been added to the board, a year plus ago. I'm guessing in board packets from my 2022 or 22 and 2023, there are presentation materials or, is there a way that we can kind of catch up on that? Because we're gonna be revisiting this in the future.
yeah,
And I've kind of struggled with.
Yep.
Gee, I've raised questions about like the pond inventory.
mhm,
Seems like there are databases out there and there are sources of information that it's not real user friendly to.
mhm, yeah.
Where do you go get this?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of things are, for staff use, and then if you have questions, we can share the information and data. We don't have like, the warp isn't available just for anybody to use, right? Like, we're just still figuring that all out, but, and the warp is new, so there really
Right.
won't be old things to share with you on that, but.
So there aren't like screenshots or.
No, I mean, so you were here when we talked about, I don't remember what month that was this year.
When we talked about scope summary for it, or when we talked about,
Yeah, I think Tyler presented on it.
Oh,
did you
yeah,
present on it? I was
Tyler
trying to
presented
remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember
But
what
that-
month that was, but that was this year. So that's all we've had about the work.
But I
It's
think-
new, but-
Yeah, but I think, isn't it next month that you guys are talking about it again with the board?
I think so.
Yeah, so
We'll talk about that.
I think the intent is to bring it back to the board to show how it's been leveraged in finding retrofit projects. So the reason for its creation was because, to your point, we have all this great information in all these different studies, and we have, all sorts of power in GIS to map them all together. So, and we've gotten, the district has gotten much more sophisticated in looking for retrofit opportunities and has reached out to a lot of people, and it became difficult to keep track of all of that. So the purpose of that warp database is to keep track of all of it and use it to identify retrofit projects going forward. So now Paige and Marcy have started to embark on that. And so the idea was to have someone, Paige and probably Tyler and Marcy, I think, come back this fall to talk about, here's how we used it, here's what we found. And actually, just as an example, as Jay was presenting on the retrofit study, I was reminded that area, that standalone area, that 1D area, is an area that Marcy and Tyler and Brandon and I were looking at because it showed, if I remember correctly, it shows up in the warp as a potentially good spot for a water quality retrofit project.
Yeah.
So it's the perfect example of how we can keep tabs on, like, okay, they're working on flood risk reduction. We're looking for water quality retrofit, and where we find something fitting together, we can make a project bigger than just the sum of its parts. So the bottom line is, I think you're gonna be seeing a presentation.
Yeah.
And it is relatively new, but it's built off of data and studies that have been done for decades, so.
Good. Thank you.
Offline, I can show you how to better search for it. I use Google and I found the reference to the board where we talked
Okay.
about. I'll show you later.
Google searching, good.
You'll get it faster. Awesome. One thing that I encourage people to do is the natural report. Go walk some of those. I know I have plans to take my family out there, so I'm really excited to see some of it, just to put into terms, I believe it's Paul wrote that section. I encourage you to go out. I'm sure those who ride bikes see it. All right. I don't have any further comments. Do any of y'all have comments? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I will motion that we adjourn.
Second. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes, good meeting.
Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.